Come on in, friend. You look frozen.
Poor black restaurant owner feeds an old homeless man. What happens next completely transforms his life. Snow had been falling since dawn, soft and steady, coating Birchwood town in quiet white. The streets were empty, the kind of silence that came only when the world surrendered to winter. At the edge of the street stood Mason Reed's Diner, a small, time-worn building with a flickering neon sign that read "Open," though it barely glowed through the frost gathering on the glass. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of coffee and fried onions. Mason moved slowly behind the counter, wiping at the chrome surface that never seemed to shine the way it once had. The diner was nearly empty now. Most days it was. Unpaid bills cluttered his office drawer, unopened. The heater groaned weakly, fighting to push warmth through the chill that slipped in every time the door opened. Still, Mason kept the place alive. Not for profit, but for people. But before we dive into what happens next, I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from today? Drop your country in the comment below and please like the video. Thank you. Now let's continue. He couldn't turn away anyone who came in hungry. It wasn't about business anymore. It was about something deeper, a promise to himself that no one would be left out in the cold. And as the snow piled higher outside, Mason's hope grew thinner, but it never disappeared. Evening fell early that night. The wind howled down the empty road, carrying with it tiny shards of ice that stung the skin. Mason was about to close when the bell above the door chimed softly. A man stepped inside, thin, shivering and covered in snow. His coat was soaked through, his beard unkempt, and his hands trembled as if he hadn't been warm in days. Without a word, Mason reached for a towel and motioned to a booth near the heater. "Sit down, friend," he said, voice low but kind. "You look frozen to the bone." The man didn't answer. He only nodded, the weariness in his eyes saying more than words could. Mason poured him a mug of steaming coffee, then ladled out a bowl of hot stew, the last of what he had cooked for the night. He added a thick slice of bread and placed the plate gently before him. From a corner booth, two locals whispered. "There he goes again," one said. "Feeding everyone who shows up broke and cold. Kindness won't keep the lights on," the other muttered. Mason heard them. He always did. But he didn't care. He looked at the trembling stranger and simply said, "Eat. It's warm. That's all that matters tonight." Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, warmth flickered, faint but real. The next morning, the world was buried in white. Snow drifts pressed against doors, and smoke curled from chimneys like slow-moving ghosts. Mason arrived early, brushing snow from the diner's entrance, his breath fogging in the frigid air. By noon, a few regulars trickled in, mostly older folks who needed warmth as much as food. Then the bell chimed again. It was the same man from last night, still wearing that tattered coat. Mason's lips curved into a small smile. "You again," he said, half teasing. "Well, lucky for you, I made pancakes today." He served him a plate without asking for payment. The man ate quietly, his eyes following Mason's every movement. How he spoke to customers, how he smiled despite exhaustion, how he treated even the poorest stranger like an old friend. From the back table, the whispers began again. "He's soft," one man said. "He'll lose everything." Another snorted. "Good intentions don't pay the bills." Mason heard every word, but he kept his back straight and his hands busy. He'd rather freeze doing the right thing than grow rich by turning people away. As the week dragged on, the snow thickened, and so did Mason's troubles. Deliveries stopped. One supplier refused to send another crate until Mason cleared his debts. His pantry shelves thinned until all that remained were scraps. A few onions, some potatoes, and half a bag of rice. Still he cooked. Still he served. The stranger came each evening, sitting quietly at the same booth by the window. He never spoke much, but his eyes carried something deep. Curiosity, maybe admiration, or both. One night, as Mason stepped outside to dump the trash, he overheard two men talking near the lamppost. "He's done for," one said. Doesn't matter, the other replied. That fool chose to go broke feeding strangers. Mason stopped in his tracks, the cold biting into his fingers. For the first time, their words pierced deeper than the wind. Maybe they were right. Maybe kindness wasn't enough anymore. But as he looked back through the frosted window and saw the stranger hunched over his bowl, steam rising into the air, Mason shook the thought away. No, he couldn't stop now. Not when people still needed warmth, even if all he had left to give was soup and kindness. A few mornings later, Mason found a thick envelope stuck between the door handles. He tore it open and felt his chest tighten. Foreclosure notice. He sat at the counter, staring blankly at the words. The snow outside had muffled all sound. Even the ticking of the old clock seemed slower, heavier. When evening came, the diner was nearly empty. Only one customer sat there, the same stranger. Mason sat across from him this time. Neither spoke for a long while. The man ate quietly, and Mason just watched, his thoughts heavy and tangled. He had nothing left. The diner, his life's work, was slipping away. But even then, he didn't regret the meals he'd given. The only thing that hurt was the thought that he might not be able to keep helping the next hungry soul who walked in from the cold. 2 days later the storm eased, but the air stayed sharp and biting. The door opened, and 2 officers stepped inside, stamping snow from their boots. Behind them followed a man in a wool coat, clipboard in hand. "Mason Reed?" one officer asked. Mason nodded. "I'm sorry," the man said, his tone flat and practiced. "The property is being repossessed. You have until the end of the day." A few townspeople watched from their tables, whispering. "Knew this was coming," one said quietly. All that free food finally caught up to him. Mason's throat felt dry. He simply nodded, his hands resting on the counter. The place he had poured his soul into was slipping away, not with a bang, but with a quiet shuffle of papers and the weight of silence. Then suddenly a deep hum echoed outside, the sound of engines idling. Through the fogged glass, Mason saw a line of black SUVs pull up in front of the diner. The snow crunched beneath expensive boots as several people stepped out. The officers froze. The onlookers fell silent. The diner door swung open. A tall man entered, brushing snow from his shoulders. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit, his beard neatly trimmed, his posture commanding. Behind him, assistants carried thick folders and briefcases. Mason's heart skipped. It was him, the same man he'd been feeding all week. The stranger smiled faintly. "You've kept this place warm even when the world outside froze," he said. His voice was calm, smooth, but carried weight. He placed a heavy folder on the counter. "These are your papers, Mr. Reed. The diner, the land, everything. Paid in full." Gasps filled the diner. The officers looked at each other, uncertain. Mason blinked. I don't understand." The man nodded slowly. "You gave me food when I was nobody. You didn't ask for my name, didn't ask for money. You just cared. I wanted to see if that kindness was real, if it was who you truly were, even when no one was watching." He stepped closer, his expression softening. "I'm Elias Crane, investor, philanthropist. And once, a man who had lost faith in people. Until I met you." He turned to the stunned crowd. "I came to Birchwood to decide where to build a community foundation. I found my answer here, in a diner kept alive by one man's heart." He looked back at Mason. "You don't owe anything anymore. In fact, I want to help you expand. Let's build more places like this, warm, simple, honest. Places where kindness isn't rare." Mason's hands trembled as he touched the folder. His eyes welled with tears he couldn't hide. The whispers in the diner shifted, shame replacing judgment. The very people who mocked him now looked at him with awe. Outside, the snowfall slowed, sunlight breaking through gray clouds. The white world glistened. Mason stepped toward the window, watching the light bounce off the snow. For the first time in months, warmth filled his chest, not from the heater but from hope. He turned back to Elias. "Thank you," he whispered. Elias smiled. "Don't thank me. You earned this. You reminded me what humanity looks like." The crowd clapped softly. Even the officers smiled. As the day faded, Mason flipped the diner sign from closed to open. He wiped his eyes, took a deep breath, and started the coffee pot again. Tomorrow would bring new faces, new stories, and anyone who came in hungry would still find a meal waiting. Because Mason Reed's kindness, once seen as weakness, had become the reason his light still shone, even in the middle of winter. And as snow fell gently outside, the diner glowed warm against the frozen world, a promise that goodness, no matter how small, always finds its way back. Before you go, we'd love your support. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Echoes of Life Stories. Every click helps us keep bringing you more powerful tales of hope, kindness, and second chances. Your subscription isn't just a number. It's a reminder that stories like this still matter. So hit that subscribe button, join our growing family, and let's keep the light of humanity alive. One story at a time. Glowing Star.